One, the rental space for the Gordon Buchanan Center. Can I get a motion on this one, Councillor Courtlay?
That council support the use of the Performing Arts Center to AHS.
All right. We're all up to speed on this one. One question: are they in there and functioning now?
No, they're not. They're moving in. IT, I guess, was there today. Last I heard, which was today, they're hoping on the weekend.
Oh, okay.
So I've committed several days to you.
Yeah.
And so that's the latest as of today.
Okay.
Do you have like an update as to what they're actually going to call it or do, so we can
I
share
drove
that
by it today, and there is actually a sign that says AHS in the door.
Councillor Gilroy.
Just wondering what the contract date is. There's nothing on here to say. Is it like October 1st to September 30th?
October 1st to September 30th year, with the option of extension, and there's also a clause in there with regards to June, depending, but it's right now a year. So hopefully, and it all really depends on the whole COVID situation, right?
Now, the other question is they wanted to make an announcement. Have they made their announcement yet? And you don't know, right?
The individual that was going to be providing me with the information indicated that they couldn't get it, and if there was any communication coming, it would come to our municipality.
Okay. All right.
I think that's almost the exact wording.
All right. Well, it's now been talked about in a public meeting, so it's kind of going to be out there now. But anyways, yeah. But we have to.
Although I was talking to, when I was out taking pictures of the antennas at the new Heart River Housing last week, I was talking to Ray Prebo. His wife works at the hospital. At the hospital, and I was asking him what what's he been doing. He's usually like going out playing horseshoes, and says haven't done anything. And so he says, but hoping to have a tournament next September or May or something. But we have to use the sports palace because AHS plans to use that for their vaccinations and whatever. And
You got that from Ray?
Yeah, I know. Well, yeah. He's making a lot of assumptions yet. Yeah. Yeah.
Don't think that's accurate.
Yeah. Yeah.
He's gonna go out there.
Just yeah.
for what?
Yeah.
Could be.
Fake news. Yeah.
You work for Fox.
Yeah. Okay. One.
So I'm assuming that if suddenly their budget gets cut, everything's in place for an out clause for them and for the town?
So I'm pretty sure going back to it, the earliest it could be broken, I think, was June. I can't remember the first of June.
Guaranteed to June at least. Okay.
Yep.
You never know what the cost and stuff like that.
I mean, I think the positive is there's very little additional cost to the town or Big Lakes County because it is a shared use facility. So the increased costs attributable to them moving in is pretty limited. So it's
Will we share the money with them? Kidding. Don't write that down. No.
Okay. Anything else on this one? We have a motion. Oh. Yep. It is good that it's rented. All right. All in favor? It's carried. Moving on to our CAO's report and action list. Councillor Gilroy.
The council received the CAO Rod Risling's report and action list for information.
All right. I'll turn it over to our CAO.
Okay, I think maybe I'm just going to highlight a couple things. First is with regards to the contaminated site. There was a piece of information that went through my office a couple of weeks ago, and so that was positive from the perspective of the province did inform the property owner that they required additional information, so they were seeking additional information from the company. And earlier today, I got an email from the company seeking a bit of an extension to providing the additional detail, but it wasn't that long, like a few months. I think it was into December to get that information to them. So things are still moving. I know that's been something this council's been dealing with for a long time, but at least there is still movement. The other thing I think of note that I'd like to bring up is I attended a Mighty Peace tourism meeting in McLennan probably 2 weeks ago. One of the things that they're attempting to do is to expand their tourism region. What they are proposing is to get a lot of the municipalities, basically from High Prairie, Two Peace, to join them. What they're finding is there's a lot of there's a lot of people that are traveling within Alberta, so there's been some record crowds from that perspective, and what they're finding is they're attempting to get entrepreneurs together and feed off each other. So what I mean by that is, if they do a tour on the river, maybe the river tour folks know the person that's producing local honey or a bed and breakfast along the way to go look at trail someplace. And what they do is they try to get together, and maybe the riverboat guy will give some honey, and then maybe when that person goes home, they'll actually order some more honey from the entrepreneur in this area. And so what they're trying to do is just broaden their area of entrepreneurs to assist in actually developing these type tours. So however, it comes at a cost. They're seeking about $2.65 per capita. And then also Little Smoky was there, and they, at the end of the presentation, because it was the Mighty Peace giving the presentation, right at the very end of the presentation, Smoky River asked, well, maybe we could coordinate municipalities east of them, and we could give them also $1 per capita, and then they would tie into the Mighty Peace. So at the end of the day, what Big Lakes was also at this meeting, what we're trying to do is maybe get the Community Futures group together in this Mighty Peace, because Community Futures is also somewhat looking at how to promote businesses. Maybe there's a little bit of a marriage there that can occur, and so there is a meeting scheduled, I believe, rather soon on those entities, so we can see if there can be a marriage there, and maybe if there's a lot of demand, we can bring it back to council for consideration. But right now, I think this administration's recommendation to see, rather than just fork over or recommend for council to give $2.65 per capita, maybe see if there's a solution that can be done that's more cost effective. I mean, a long story, but I know it's something that you may have heard about, where they were asking for funding, and I wanted to let you know that administration thought maybe there's some more cost-effective ways to deal with their request at this stage. So that's that. The next thing, one of the things that occurred at AUMA is there's all this talk potentially of provincial policing, that type of thing. What they did offer municipalities is the opportunity to talk to the head person for the Alberta Policing, and the deputy. And so if this council wants to take that opportunity, we have to let AUMA know very, very soon. So I'm just bringing that, I'm highlighting that to you, because some of you attended some of the AUMA sessions, but it may be something that you're interested in. I know there's been some chatter as far as having increased presence within the community. One of the other pieces of chatter out there is that there's potential for additional positions in the Alberta area. So if there's additional positions, maybe that's an opportunity for High Prairie to get to get them. So just if you do so choose to seek that meeting with the deputy, I would really like to take that direction, proceed, and letting AUMA know. Maybe should have done a report, but
No, it's a deputy commander of the entire K division. And he actually encouraged us to contact him directly, though, not through AUMA. He said through. But if they're doing it that way, that's fine. It's still the deputy director or deputy commander of all of K division.
So when do you need an answer on that by?
Very soon.
Like-
It's like probably tonight, I
Okay.
think,
we'll
that we
have
can
to-
proceed to put it in. I think what I had heard, if we waited till the 28th to get to the update, because that's when the sergeant's coming in to give his update, that would be too late.
Okay.
So, or potentially too late. So we should move
Should do it
quickly
today.
if that's
Okay.
something that council would like administration to do.
Well, what does council think? My thoughts is, why not? See if we can get in and push for some more members in our community would be great. I mean, it would be, I think it's gonna be a very tough sell for us because we're using the extra funding is coming out of what we've already using, they're taking out of our enhanced policing, so we're not really paying more. But we can certainly try, right? I mean, we would like some more. We know we have some gaps in policing. When they leave the community, then there's nobody here because they're on a call somewhere in the region, but that leaves our town without any coverage. We could try for that.
Yeah, I don't think there's any harm in giving it the conversation an opportunity, right?
Okay.
Yeah, I recommend this. I think it was last meeting, but when I questioned him at AUMA, I was talking about how to coordinate all our police forces together because we have multiple ones in this town, and so I think that was one that he really wanted to think about, and we could address that and how to coordinate our peace officer with the sheriffs and all the groups together to make it a more efficient work up here, and he was willing to talk about that.
Okay, so I'm seeing from council that we want to see if we can get a meeting, okay? Okay, so,
If I could also ask that if you have additional questions, they would prefer if questions were provided in advance. So if there are any additional questions you'd like to ask, please forward them to me, maybe within the next 48 hours.
or any other
Sounds
comments while you're here? Any other questions that we'd have for them? We're talking, number one, about getting extra policing in our region, and number two is coordinating some of the various enforcement agencies.
Yeah, you have to remember that at AUMA there was also a resolution that was passed for some communities that have peace officers already, that they would be given special consideration to have less of a burden, financial burden, because we're already paying peace officers. So it'd be interesting to see his take, if he's got anything to do with that. But that was a resolution that did pass AUMA.
He probably doesn't have any say over that, but we can always bring it up to him. Councillor Danaka?
The other thing too is, I don't know, I would like to, if he's the head of this area, I would like to find out what their take is on the government's looking at disbanding,
Private, or making
disbanding
a
the
provincial
RCMP and
police.
going to private policing.
Well, it's a provincial
Or
police.
provincial police, thank you. The provincial police, so I'd like to see what their take is on that.
So, yeah, their thoughts on a provincial versus the RCMP being in the province. Yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's gonna fly. I think it's gonna cost more than what it costs now, but I don't have all that information, so.
So I just wonder, and unfortunately I wasn't able to watch that session at AUMA, but I wanted to. I'm wondering if we should take a look at that and just see if any information came out of the AUMA presentation rather than duplicating questions. I'm not, it might just make us look,
Uninformed.
just, so maybe,
Yeah, I can't even remember
Yeah,
how.
Bill?
You guys have the YouTube link, right? So,
I sent it to everybody.
yeah, so that information's all there. You can click on the YouTube link that.
Bill Sweeney was the one who addressed it. It wasn't this person. Bill Sweeney that addressed the provincial police force.
I think there's enough members to
No more.
Yeah, Arlen, that's not true. I can tell you that's not true. Yeah. You might think it, but I know it's not true.
Can I ask you a question about the, are we done pleasing enough to ask you a question about the Mighty All Peace Tourism meeting?
I think so, because I've got, I didn't mind that question, I just wonder how we should leave it, if I should, because it might be good to hear from him, but I just, does anybody remember what that session said?
As I said, Bill Sweeney was talking on behalf of the government, and he was talking about where they were as yet, but I would probably agree with you that you're not going to see a deputy commander say, you know, that's a good idea. I think we don't want to be here anymore. I don't think that he's going to be a person who's going to, you know, put a hole in his own boat. And I don't remember him saying anything to that extent either.
Well, maybe we can
But we-
consider watching that again and then
But we-
forwarding questions.
We can also ask why. I agree. I mean, the RCMP isn't going to say, yeah, this is the right way to go. But I think getting their opinions on why they think that is something that you can add in as information.
Yeah, that is actually in the session. It talks about having us train at our own training grounds, etc. All the whole police force together.
But I mean,
And,
not everybody attended that session from other places, so I think it's fair to say, okay, what about this, right? I mean, yes, it was talked about there, but if we weren't at the session and many people weren't, it's still fair to hear their thoughts on it.
So I'm hearing we'll put that on.
Yeah. Okay, now Councillor Rose had a question about the Mighty Peace Tourism meeting.
Just about what their 2.65 per person pay or payment was for. Like, what is it? A website? Are they like? What are they really trying to do?
So they did indicate that money would likely go towards administrative costs. Right now, the organization, and it sounds like a very, very active and functional group. They did indicate that they had some struggles, but they are doing well now. And I should write on my notes, but there's a lot of municipalities that are part of it, and they have a board of directors that is very, very significant. So they have a lot of participation, but they are struggling on the side, especially if they get bigger. Is they require the coordination or the horsepower to bring the business leaders together and put on excursions, like, saying, okay, maybe we should focus on, because these three businesses are here, coordinating those folks and advertising the excursion on riverboating or whatever the heck it is. So they don't do so much as like developing this stuff. They really want the entrepreneurs themselves to say these are the types of things they'll do, and they'll assist them with doing videos, that type of thing, and saying and posting them. So they're really there as a support mechanism for the tourism industry. But the money would mostly go to administration.
I had one question. I wasn't sure what a Quest meeting was.
So, yes. So, Big Lakes County, what they did is they're participating in a pilot project. The Alberta government put out a tender a year or so ago, looking for companies to assist them in developing more of a longer-term, almost emergency preparedness type of a thing. And so Big Lakes County, Ponoka, I think, is one, and there's one down south, but there's 4 municipalities in the province that put up their hand, and these consultants are going through a process with them in identifying risk mitigation factors to to alleviate disasters or prepare themselves for disasters. And so what they're doing in this pilot is actually, so in the end, Big Lakes County will actually have a pretty decent plan. Like things like, they identified all the generators in the area. Did they have generators on their pump stations and all kinds of things. Like there's, like I'd say a couple hundred questions. And so what's going to end up happening is the government's using this as a pilot, and the reports are going to be published. And likely, once the government adopts this, it's likely something that other municipalities can use or go through. So in the end, Big Lakes County will have a whole plan. They invited us because we're part of the area, and if they're going to be doing something, it is absolutely going to impact us as well. And so at some point, they'll be knocking on our door to say, probably, I'll just use the generators argument. Like, how many additional generators do you have? But there's like 200 questions. And so once you have this whole plan, it just helps you not only in case of a disaster, but it helps you consider things as you're approving maybe developments. Maybe give additional consideration to clearing out forests before you approve subdivisions. Small things like that. When you're reviewing this policy, figure out these 3 things because it will actually mitigate things because you thought about it before. Does that kind of help you? So it was about, I think, 3 or 4 meetings. And I got invited to the couple of them, and yeah, once it's approved or done, the government, I'm sure, will be making some announcements, and it'll be something that I don't know if they'll legislate us to do, but I can certainly see the value in something like that.
Councillor Gilroy.
Yeah, actually, we went to one of those about a couple of years ago when they first started with drought mitigation and a few other things. It was pretty good. I'm just kind of curious, how did we do with recruiting for aquatics manager? Do we have a number of applications?
So the posting did close on Friday, but it also said, or until suitable candidate was found. We did get applicants, and we'll go through the process.
Okay, anything else? Okay, nothing more. We had a motion to receive his report for information. All those in favor? It's carried. Moving on to our FCSS report. Can I get a motion on this one? Councillors, and I'll go with Stenhouse because she hasn't made as many tonight.
The council receives the September FCSS report and monthly stats for information.
All right.
August report and September stats.
Any question on this one?
No, you said August here. August at the top. So where's September? Is there?
But the year is 11/19. If you read total visits to date, time period, it's mostly.
Right on the answer.
No, that's 1,119 visits.
Visits.
Oh, yeah.
That's
Total
the
visits to date.
That's the statistics.
Yearly.
Yeah. That's not the year.
But that it is a little odd because that number doesn't match up to the visits on their total on the other page. Yeah, it's not consistent.
That's the point I'm looking at. That's this report says August, and the stats is September.
So she gave you the report, but the statistics are based on the date that
Okay,
it's
so we're going with the statistics.
Yeah, that could be.
Okay.
Maybe a recommendation is to receive the FCS report and monthly stats for information, just remove September.
Well, I mean, it's interesting because it says, as predicted, our numbers have increased in September. It's the first line she's got in there. But you just obviously.
Oh yeah, she
Yes,
didn't change her September. Yeah.
August.
That's the problem with using the template.
Yeah. Perfect template.
Yeah. Okay, anything else? All right, all those in favor? Carried. Moving on to, this one promises to be a little more engaging. Temporary mandatory face covering bylaw. Get a motion on this one. Councillor Rose.
The council have an open discussion regarding the implementation of a mandatory face covering bylaw and provide recommendations to administration.
All right. Anybody want to start this ball rolling?
Why don't we hear from administration?
Sure.
So, you know, across the province, I think across the country, there have been some municipalities that have instituted additional measures when cases hit certain levels. What some municipalities have done is pass mass bylaws. That seems to be the one that's probably the one that's can be implemented. So some municipalities, what they have done is pass bylaws in the event that numbers within the region hit certain levels. So I think, I'm not sure where council would like to go with this, but it'd be definitely an interesting discussion. I think I want to make it clear that this is intended to be a discussion. I think it's also intended to, you know, as from a public perspective, we've been very, very fortunate. I think in the Big Lakes area, last I looked was Saturday, there's 0 cases, but even looking on the weekend, we're getting closer to 300 cases a day provincial-wide. So I think it's just a matter of time that it creeps into the various areas. And so I think having a discussion pre-invasion is probably a good thing. I'm more of a proactive person than reactive, and knowing where council's at on some of these things before maybe it gets to be an issue, and hopefully it doesn't, but if it does, we already have a plan. So this is something that the discussion will give administration direction on whether we proceed with potentially modifications to a bylaw or just scrap it altogether. That's okay. But I think it's having a discussion before it's an issue is probably a good thing. The way it is written is that the bylaw wouldn't come into force until there was a certain number of cases within the region. And when that would occur, mass would be mandatory in public places. So basically, the bylaw is stolen from other jurisdictions. The bylaws are very similar in jurisdictions across Alberta, slight twists, but not that. They're pretty similar. So it's just to have that discussion, and there's not, there's no recommendation. It's just here for discussion and for debate.
Yeah, just to add to that, our region now has 3 COVID cases as of today. So we are creeping up. Councillor Stenhouse.
Chime in here. I find that each individual business is having their own policies of when to wear masks, or if you're allowed in there or not. If you don't have a mask, they sell them, hand them out, or whatever. And I think they're managing that quite well. I know it's like other jurisdictions are making it mandatory, but I still would like to leave it as a personal choice.
Councillor Danaka.
I mean, we have the Alberta Health guidelines that are out that says if you can't social distance 6 feet, etc. I mean, I don't think that people are tending to follow that as strict as they probably should. I know as of, I think it was the weekend or yesterday, Grand Prairie is now on a watch because they had a massive outbreak at Walmart. So, so the chances of a spike occurring are probably pretty good. But right at this point, I think that I'm still willing to leave it to follow the Alberta Health guidelines unless we get like unless 20 cases show up in High Prairie or the area, then I think we really need to probably look at something, implementing something. On the other hand, do we want to set an example? because unfortunately those who have school-age children, they have to wear the mask all day. So, I mean, if we want to set an example to the kids saying, you have to wear it, but we don't, so maybe we should. So, I'm trying to balance what's out there and what I know and what I see. But and then the other part of that is if we go to mandatory masks in public places, who's going to enforce that? Are we going to have people tattling on people saying, hey, you know, phoning up whatever, saying so-and-so isn't wearing it? Then we look at an extra cost to the businesses, because if you don't have a mask, then they have to supply it because it's a public place, it's mandatory. So, I mean, it's more than just saying, yeah, we're going to make it mandatory. There's a lot of other bits and pieces that sort of we need to figure out how that's all going to fit together before we say, yeah, let's do it. Specifically enforcement. Like I honestly don't know how that is enforceable. I mean, I know in Edmonton it's mandatory, and I know that people have been fined for not wearing that, but how that's done, I have no idea. Until our levels start to creep up, if we see a trend, then maybe we should look at it. But right now, thankfully, I think we're okay. And that's just my opinion.
So I'm just going to ask a question. What's the number for you? Like in here, it suggested 10.
I would say if we're getting up to 10 to 15, that we should probably look at doing something.
But isn't that just what administration is suggesting, is put a bylaw in place for when and if we end up with increased numbers?
And I think that's a good idea. I think that's being proactive.
But don't wait till we have 20 before we put the bylaw in place.
Right. But, I mean, I have no problem putting a bylaw in place with the stipulations of when we reach X levels, this bylaw will come into force.
And I think from the perspective of that is that, you know, being proactive, I think, is really important. And I think that putting the bylaw in place shows that we are ready, as well as that we think that it is important, and that we show that we're leaders sort of in this. I do think that when your municipalities don't take it seriously, or we're not, you know, putting in place sort of the measures, that the community puts down their guard a bit too, right? They think that, well, if nobody else in town is really enforcing it, like I'm going from community to community a little bit throughout this pandemic, and there's different ways that people are handling it, and you feel the difference, right? When you're in an area where everybody wears masks, it's much more easy to put a mask on, and everybody's sort of following, right? And then you come into a community that they're not wearing masks, and you almost feel like it's awkward to put a mask on to go somewhere, right? And so I think that raising the bar a little bit, and us being, the municipality, I don't think that it would be wrong to be that proactive and to put that in place. And I agree with you, Donna, that the students are wearing masks all day long in school. Teachers, some of them have to. I don't know all their policies on that, but there are there's nurses, frontline workers. There's lots of people in our community that have to wear a mask on a regular basis, and then there's those that just don't at all, right? And I see people go from place to place. The business community, I think a lot of people have their own masks now. I mean, there's been a mask issue for a long time, and a lot of stores will hand them out, but some just don't. If you don't have a mask on, I mean, they make it, like I've seen where it's mandatory, they want you to have it, and they look at you like if you don't have the mask, they're like, they don't actually, I haven't seen people kicked out of the stores, but sometimes they don't have them to hand out, and that's still okay. Like, I think they're just really trying to make it a priority, and I think that maybe us putting a policy in place just sort of elevates the importance of what's going on, and maybe there's an opportunity for us to be a leader in trying to limit the spread in our area. So anyway, I would support it, and I would like to see that we consider putting it in place.
Councillor Gilroy?
I actually asked a couple of business people this particular question today, and there were mixed results. One was looking at numbers, the way Don was talking about, or Councillor Dinac was talking about, and they would be happy if it hit a certain number. One of the problems we have is if you look at the AHS website, AHS and COVID, they have an aggregate number, but they list it as Big Lakes County and not High Prairie. So I think when we're looking at this, we really have to define whether it is our town and how we're going to get the accurate numbers, because we may not get accurate numbers, for one thing. I've heard people say that they don't want it at all. One of the things, and I know you're going to laugh when I say this, is one of the places that actually is allowed under this bylaw to be exempt are religious services. And the reason I say this is Saturday was Kelsey Smith's funeral. It was held at Windward Ministries. We had 100 people packed in there, which is the maximum you're allowed to have. Everyone wore a mask. And that was good, because you had people come from Edmonton, Grand Prairie, you had people from all over the place, and there was no social distancing. They were like right next to each other all the way through. And I'm saying that if you're going to do this, you need to look at all gatherings, and I don't think churches should be exempt in the sense of saying, oh, just because we're going to do this, because technically in church services, if you're not wearing a mask, these people are tempted to sing, and that's one of the things that they really have a hard time with this particular government. So I think we need to really look at how we're going to look at some of the exemptions and things like that. So I agree with it, but let's really tailor it to our community and to where the possible outbreaks are. Because if you go into a funeral or a wedding, you got people coming from different provinces who will not self-isolate. We know that. And so we need to focus on how we're going to do that. We may need masking for certain large gatherings and others not. I don't know. But I do know that if we can get accurate numbers, then I think it's very important that we find a way to enforce this. But I do have the same query that Councillor Dinaka has. How in the world will we actually enforce it when our peace officers have a hard time enforcing everything else? I mean, that's just another duty for them. It's like adding an extra thing to our CAO. There's only so much time and so much energy that we have for our employees. Excuse the expression employee, but employees there. So, if our two can't deal with going up north and doing the county and doing here and doing all the stuff we have now, and then we add on all this too, that is, what's the use of putting a bylaw if you can't enforce it too? So there's another one in there. But I would recommend that we do look at having something in place in the eventuality that we hit certain numbers.
You wanted to weigh in?
I can. Just waiting for everybody else. I agree with that. It's something we have to do. If we don't do it, are we irresponsible? There's that too. There's an obvious issue going around in the world, and if we don't prepare ourselves for whatever, we may not ever implement it, but at least it's there with a number. And I really think that if we follow the Big Lakes County provisions here, 10 or more, and I think we should use the Big Lakes County 10 or more, mainly because guess where they're coming. If they have COVID, they're still going to try to use our services in our community, in the town. So those people that have the COVID are still coming into the town. And that number, whether you say, okay, 10 just in High Prairie or 10 in the community, that number, I think we have to use the Big Lakes number, because we're a main service center for the Big Lakes. We're heart of the Big Lakes. right? So I think those are the numbers we have to use, because those are the recordable numbers.
Yeah, maybe administration will just add, we checked with Alberta Health a while ago, and we couldn't get just town of High Prairie. The Big Lakes is the smallest number, or area they'll give us.
But that's
So-
okay. But that's all right. That's what I'm saying. We are a main service hub center for the county of Big Lakes, and if they have that many that cases in the community, like in the Big Lakes, we should put the mandatory face covering into place. So I think we should implement this bylaw with those numbers in place, so that if it does happen, it's there. If it doesn't happen, great. But I think it's responsible for us to do this.
Okay. Just my thoughts on it is, yeah, I'm also in agreement with, having something ready if we need to use it. I'm not as sure about the number, though. That's where I have 10.
Who's 10?
Well, Big Lakes County.
Yeah, well, AHS is 10 or?
Well, yeah, that's what we'd have to use. I mean, we'd have to use their number. But what gets me thinking about that more is the fact that JB Woods, you can have something spread through there, and you can have 10 right away, but it's all contained in one small little area, and it's not going to go out. It's not a threat to the rest of the community, right? And whereas if you have 10 people scattered around the community, then the chances of that spreading go way, way up. So, and it's not, in some of those confined spaces, it's easy to get up to that number really quick. So for me, I kind of wrestle with 10. You can get to 10 just like that, and it could not be, it might not be in the community, right? It's not out in the public where we have to worry about it as much. Versus, 10 in our community, yes, if we get up to, I don't know, I think 10 might be a little bit low, but it's fine if they're in our community, but if they're in one of those other areas, then I go, well, 10, it can spread through a lodge like wildfire, right? You can have 10 in there. That's my only concern. The rest of it is, I totally agree with, setting something out, saying, you know what, if we get this number, we'll be implementing it, so get ready for it. Take precautions so everybody will know that if we start getting this, this will be coming. And I think that's okay. People will maybe take more precautions just to make sure that we don't hit that number if they know that this is sort of the mark where we're going to implement it.
Can we put in some sort of provision that if it's 10 non-isolated, like put something in that says that, it can be within, you're not going to implement it if it's all 10 within one isolated area. So
What
that
if
would
it's
be like
EW
Pleasant.
Pratt? That's a group, and if it's 10 people in EW Pratt or junior high or one of the schools like St. Andrews, that's the same as a JB Wood type thing.
Well, not really. They're not living in there, right?
Yeah.
They're out in the community.
They're there 5 days a week with each other, though.
You could add in isolated cases within the outline.
Yeah, because
With discretion is more like it.
I think one of the problems is I'm not sure if we'd be able to get that data. That's one of the
that's right.
struggles. I hear what Nickel Council is attempting to do, but unfortunately, we wouldn't get access to that data unless AHS changes their rules. Right now, the only information we would have is the Big Lakes
COVID
area,
is, yeah.
and you don't know if that's your neighbor. Well, maybe you know if you're the neighbor, but you don't know if it's where it is.
But you do know if it's an outbreak. But you do know if it's an outbreak, right? Like, if what's an outbreak by their standards?
5+, I think.
Is it 5+? Then it's considered an outbreak, and it's listed like, they list Walmart in Grand Prairie as an outbreak, and there's a certain number when they say, yeah, this is an outbreak. And
then,
something like
then
that.
it becomes a watch community. And then if they watch the numbers, and
Yeah. And just out of curiosity, so if Alberta Health Services is watching a community like these others have done, when will they implement mandatory masks? Because they haven't done that anywhere else, right? And that I'm aware of. Does anybody know of them implementing it?
So you're saying there's no purpose of the watch if you don't actually
Well,
implement
that's,
anything?
I don't know where they've implemented it. Like, and I see what, they've said, okay, all of these other communities are following AHS's guidelines. But they're not implementing mandatory masks. This would be a step above. It would be a step above. And I don't mind stepping above if needed. But, when do we do it? 10 to me seems low. That's, we got a big area, 10, you can have an outbreak, like I said, and you can get there.
So where did the number come from then, Rod? Like the 10?
Yeah, administration called some, or looked on their website, some other jurisdictions, and so we gave that in our report and just showed rough populations is what Fort Saskatchewan and a couple others, and so you can see there the ratios.
Like Fort Saskatchewan will implement it with 10, and they got a population of 24,000. Mind you, if you take our service region, we've got a population of 20,000, right? Like we're at the same as Fort Saskatchewan.
But the question is, does AHS, I know they do some things with the federal government, do they include in their numbers any outbreaks on reserves or settlements?
It's within the big, like in the past, when there was cases in the First Nation communities, they showed up in the Big Lake County count, yes.
Okay.
So that whole population, I mean, we're roughly 20,000, so it's, I don't know, that's my only reservation. I don't know if that, it just seems like it could, I mean, we had 3 in a day. Or over the weekend. It might have happened over the weekend. But
well, it's not like...
So it says Big Lakes County, population of 12,000, following Alberta Health Guidelines. So is that not what we would be doing, is just following Alberta Health Guidelines?
No.
We're going above and beyond Alberta Health Guidelines.
So Alberta Health may not come and say, if you get 10 cases, you've got to put on mandatory face
What does it say in their guidelines?
It doesn't say, it
Doesn't
says
say-
they recommend.
They're not
They
changing
recommend.
anything just because there's been, if there's 100 cases that come into Big Lakes County or the town of Peace River, Alberta Health Services isn't really doing anything different besides putting them on watch.
Because if we go with the number 10, and like we were just talking about, what if all of a sudden in Swan Hills they have 11? All of a sudden 11 in Swan Hills. They're in the Big Lakes County.
Yeah.
And then we are immediately mandatory to wear masks here.
In public spaces.
That's right. Because Swan Hills has,
Yeah.
well, I'm just saying, that's
But I mean that.
that's how it reads, right? So
We cannot separate, we can't get data that says
I know,
Alberta.
but that's
And
what I'm
there
saying.
are some
So-
areas, like you said, we are the center of Big Lakes, but we don't cover the whole thing. Like Swan Hills isn't coming to High Prairie. Canuso doesn't come to High Prairie generally.
So is this whole temporary mandatory face covering bylaw, is it a moot point then? Should we just say, you know what, we'll continue following Alberta Health Guidelines
Exactly.
and just go with that?
Or maybe we can just go with a
Because-
higher number of groups. For
Go with
example,
50?
if you have a certain number of people at a particular thing, then we ask for masking. But if you're talking smaller groups,
So go with the number 50, if 50 people.
no,
in
I'm
the
just
race?
saying, for example, if you're talking some of the small stores that only have 2 or 3 people at a time, that's a small group. But if you're having a large group of 100 people or 200 people, which under AHS guidelines you still can have, and they're all mixed into one place,
Yeah.
you should have masks for that number of people. But if it's only a couple people, I'm saying.
But it's
for
not
larger
the
gatherings.
question, right? Like, that
No, but
we're
that can be
having,
part of- that can be
supplying
part
the
of it.
mask.
But-
It's just, do we wanna pick a number, and do we wanna put in a mandatory, temporary mask, or face mask?
Run their businesses the way they see.
So it's not necessarily business, we're talking public spaces, right?
Okay.
Like, yeah, so I mean, it's people coming into the town office, it's not necessarily, it's like going to the library, it's going to the pool, it's public spaces, right? Do we want to put that level of safety into the community, or are we happy with no masks? That's basically it, because right now, High Prairie is not wearing masks, and everybody who's walking around High Prairie, going into stores, there's the occasional mask. I can't say that I see very many masks. Do you guys see that?
I do. I
Besides
see
Tim.
masks.
But there's lots in
Micah would have
And
had
Aqua.
that too.
Iga.
Yeah.
In where?
Like I see lots
There
of
it
people
is.
wearing masks. I'd probably say 50% of the people when
Oh,
I
in
see-
IGA, sorry.
In IGA.
Didn't get your,
Yeah.
okay.
Wow.
But their staff aren't wearing it,
Yeah.
right? So it's
Yes,
But
not very many staff are
No,
wearing it.
they're behind.
If they're a
Coverage.
cashier, but if they're stocking shelves or whatever, they're not wearing masks, right? So they don't have a policy. They don't have a policy in place.
Right.
We don't have a policy in the arena for them to be wearing masks in the arena. We don't have a policy, and so I mean, these are the public spaces that we're talking about. So do we want a policy? Do we want to follow Strathcona County, City of Edmonton, Fort Saskatchewan, who have an actual policy in place, or do we want to follow Alberta Health Services guidelines, which is if things get bad, we'll watch you closer.
yeah.
That's it. That's their policy. Like they're not going to say, oh, you guys have to wear masks or we're going to change anything now. They're just going to put your area in the news on watch.
Yeah.
Like Quebec or one of those other areas that are going kind of crazy, right? So it is just about a safety precaution. And I agree that 10 seems low, but what's an okay number of COVID cases in your community? Like 0, right? So if we can do something that limits the spread and all it is putting on a mask to walk into a public space, I don't know that it's that horrible of a task, right? If that's all we have to do to limit it, we don't know for sure how that works, but I mean, right now, that's the one thing. We can keep our distance, we can wash our hands, we can put on a mask. Do we want to put that in place, or do we not want to? And I think that if by putting it in place, and even the community hearing that we're thinking about putting it in place, or that there is a policy in place that will be activated when, and whatever case count, that number it comes, that we agree to, they're going to start taking it more seriously, and maybe we'll actually see increased use. Because if the Town of High Prairie Council is taking it to that point where we're putting a bylaw in place, maybe it will raise everybody's own awareness of the seriousness of it. Just my thoughts. Because I do see, like again, going into Edmonton, people know I've been into BC, I see a huge difference with how serious people are taking it, and I don't feel that it's taken as seriously here.
I mean, luckily we're not at a point where we've had numerous cases. I mean, it is around us. I mean, Canuso School just had a case or whatever. So, I mean, to me, this is a simple strategy. Stick with 10. If we get 10 in the area, then this becomes mandatory.
10 in the immediate area.
In the immediate area, whatever, but then you have to define what immediate is, within what, 100-mile radius, 200 miles?
We don't know that information, Madonna. The only
I know.
it's Big Lakes County.
I know,
That's what
but
we have to do.
what I'm saying is that we go with 10, and it automatically kicks in, whether the 10 is at the JB Woods, the 10 is in the hospital, the 10 is, whatever, or wherever. I think we need to have something in place in case something happens. We have, this is drafted here, it kicks in when we have 10 cases, I mean, it's a simple process. I mean, I understand free choice and all of that, and people are left wing and right wing and way out to lunch with some of their, I can't breathe with the mask on and my glasses fog up. Oh well, too bad. Get used to it. You know, like, I mean, honestly, I think we have to implement something as a precautionary measure in case something happens, so we're not like, oh, we got to call a special meeting. Are we going to do masks or not? We don't have to, because we have a policy or a bylaw that's in place right now that will be reviewed in the end of December. I think it says December 31st or whatever it goes till, and go from there. Yeah, December 31st, 2021. And if by chance COVID miraculously disappears like a wave, then, but at least we have something in place and we're not scrambling. And I think we should implement it as it is right now, and then it's there if we need it.
Councillor Courtly?
Does it say, I was just trying to find it in the bylaw, does it say if the number drops below 10 to like 9, does a mandatory face covering come off?
And then you go up back the next day.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? But so is it wishy-washy? Does it go back and forth? Yeah, it doesn't say, right?
That is one of the struggles, because it is, if it goes down to 9, then the bylaw wouldn't be enforced. So you're right. That's one of the struggles with it.
Right.
When you
so it depends on who hears the news that day.
Yeah, that's one of the struggles, and I think that's why some of the other organizations like Edmonton and stuff, what they did is it's just mandatory. You know, so that you may be accomplishing a few things. Depends what you ultimately want to do.
Yeah.
If you, I mean, by even discussing it, you get maybe some media coverage and indicate the importance of, you know, just thinking about COVID. You know, we've been living in this for a long time, and you know, we've been pretty untouched. Like, you know, I'm not going to say untouched, but we're pretty lucky considering some other communities. So just talking about it, I think, is important. I think those that have traveled around do see down High Prairie pretty lax compared to others. So I think in doing the bylaws at some of the communities when they did them, you know, especially in different regions, they're going to hit that number and they're going to stay there for a long time. One of the struggles, as you get smaller, you're right, it's going to be on and off again. You could just simply then maybe rescind the bylaw or amend it and say it's mandatory now for X period of time. But you're right, the way it is written, it goes up and down and can become a bit of a problem. Absolutely. Yeah. But it's,
well,
these are trying times as well. Nobody's ever faced this type of thing, right?
I know.
So it's what you're
But we're really looking at trying to find people.
Can I just, the point is I'm making is all of a sudden one day there's 10, the next day there's 9, but maybe on the day that there was 9, you got a ticket for $200 and there's 9, but the word out before that was 10. You know, you know what I mean, like it, or $100 or what is it here?
In my
$100.
My way of thinking, Arlen, is once you hit that number, it stays in place until council removes it. It doesn't go on again, off again based on that number. It's on. Well, and this is just a discussion. We're not making a motion on this bylaw. Yeah, but I think what we would say, in my opinion, is we are now implementing this bylaw. This bylaw will be retracted when council feels it is safe to do so. Right? Like, it's not when it drops to 9, it comes off again. Because you're right. This flip-flopping would be ridiculous. This is now a bylaw. It's going into place. And maybe we don't even put a number into the bylaw, and council just has this discussion that, okay, we're up over 10, we're going to be putting it in. Or, you know, maybe we know that all of the cases are in Swan Hill, so we're not gonna implement a bylaw. Maybe we don't put a number in here. We'll have this ready and we put it into place when we feel it's needed, right? And it could be, like I say, we don't know where those numbers are. That's the problem, right? We don't know if they're in High Prairie or they're in Swan Hills. We don't know that. We can't get that information. So it's...
How did you get the number that there's 3 here?
Well, you get that because that's Big Lakes County number. That's not a High Prairie number. That's a Big Lakes County number. That's off the provincial website.
So you don't know whether it's physically here or...
Yeah, like we heard one's in Canoe, so I've heard that, and it's just rumors that I don't know where that came from, but...
AHS released the letter, it was in the school.
Oh, was it? Okay. I'm not sure where that came. But anyways, that's, we don't have to have a number in there. We can have a number in our mind that we want to, but if we want. I mean, this is just the discussions. We've got lots of leeway here.
True, because I mean, that would alleviate, like if we just have a mandatory face mask bylaw, it's there at the discretion of council to decide to implement it. We don't necessarily have to have a key number that's going to
trigger it.
To trigger it, it's just a mandatory face mask bylaw. And as the mayor said, once it's implemented until council deems it's safe to be removed.
And where does council get its medical training from to put it in and remove it? We want to go above what our top doctors are saying and recommending, and we're going to go above that.
Which is
where
mandatory.
does council? Where's council's degree in this?
Using your information.
But we're going above what they're suggesting. What medical professionals are telling us, we want to go above it. So where is our training? Where's our degree in medical training on this COVID that we can go above? Right.
I'm not following you.
So what she's saying is Alberta Health says
You're the trained people in this, with the staff, with everything.
Alberta Health guidelines, we're
Yeah.
saying we're going a step ahead of the guidelines.
Right.
We're going above the guidelines.
Right?
She's saying what gives us the knowledge and the information to be able to do that. That's what she's saying.
I don't know where you were, like Alberta Health Services has this guideline that says 6 feet apart. They've decreased the numbers of gatherings, and it used to be 50, now it's 15 and or whatever, in and out and stuff. But I mean, either we're gonna do it or we're not. It's that simple. Doesn't matter if AHS, and we're not medical doctors or whatever, either we're going to implement it or we're not going to implement it. It's a basic yes or no. It's that simple. Do we want to have a bylaw that's there if we need to and we feel as councils, whoever the council is at the time, this one or who gets elected next year in October, they have this bylaw at their fingertips to use if need be. And I mean, I know people are out there saying, oh no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't, we don't want masks, we don't want masks. Well, I understand where they're coming from in the sense that it's my choice, but I mean, we are in a pandemic. And I mean, I think we need to bite the bullet and say, okay, we have this in place if we need it. It's mandatory. From the time that we say it's mandatory until the time that we deem it's safe enough to remove it. And if we have to put it back in, we will.
So we're sort of saying that, and what you're saying, Judy, is that You know, if AHS says it's good enough to not have a mask bylaw, then why are we going above and beyond, right? I think they put in a minimum standard, and then they expect everybody's going to do what's sort of best for their community. I think that one thing that I was surprised about was that the government right away reacted. I mean, they gave us all sorts of different rules. Oh, don't wear a mask, you know, and then we're supposed to wear a mask. But along the way, in March, the government told all of their workers to go home. And they were told they're not coming back for a year. Basically, the federal government knew in March they were not putting people back to work in offices for a year. There are people that we know that used to live in High Prairie, worked in Ottawa, and she was told that her job was a 9-month position, and she was told you might as well just go back to the East Coast, or that's where she ended up, because this office is never opening again. They didn't tell us that. They didn't give us that sort of indication that it was that serious. You can't go to Service Canada. You're not going to go to Service Canada until at least April. So if they're that worried about it, maybe we should take it a little more seriously and consider that the minimum standard that AHS is implementing is okay, but I don't think there's anything wrong with putting a little more safety that really, I don't think it really hurts anybody. Like if it was really going to create a quality of life humongous problem for the community to say, you got to wear a mask when you go into a public space, but if it actually has the opportunity to help, I'm just sort of afraid that the government hasn't really given us a real clear picture of what's happening, because that's not what they're doing. That's not how they're running their business now, right? We're all sitting here without a mask on, without social distancing, basically, and we're being asked to come to meetings. Like I've been asked to go to a Zoom meeting in a chamber, so we can gather in the chamber, even though the meeting is going to be brought to us by Zoom, because that's the way, the councils would like us to do it. But the government has, the government's not expecting that, right? The government's expecting everybody to work from home. I mean, even TELUS. They've sent all of their employees home. There is not one TELUS main office that's open anymore. They are all working from home. Doesn't matter whether they're working from Manila or Ecuador or wherever. I've had to call TELUS so many times lately. And I've talked to somebody in other parts of the world, and I always ask them, are you guys working from home, or are you guys in an office yet? Oh no, we're not going to be in any offices. They're all working from home. So anyway, I just think that maybe we need to make our own decision what's best for our community, not necessarily just based on what AHS thinks is the minimum standard.
I think we also need to remember that we don't actually enforce every bylaw that we set out there. So if we put this in place, we have it as a safety net so that when the time arises that we're not satisfied with what AHS says, maybe or maybe they change their mind, we have it at least in place. But as I said, there's a lot of bylaws that we do not enforce with this council.
So you're asking struggling businesses already to hire somebody to sit at the door and they're going to monitor who has a mask?
We're not asking that.
Well, then how are you going to put this in place? So we're going to
Any other community that's done it, or any other store, or I don't think that.
If you go to Edmonton or Calgary and you want to go into a store, if you don't, or into a
they
public
have
place,
a greeter at the door that says, do you
No,
have
they
a
don't.
mask?
No, they don't.
Peace River does.
Some places do. if
some
it's a big
places
store.
do, but lots don't. I mean, you can go in a store in Edmonton, and then if you're not wearing one, they'll eventually confront you, but you're not met at the door.
There's a sign at the door.
Right.
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's a sign, yeah.
And there's also
So how is
discussion
that
about
any different
there's also
from-
discussion about people that can't wear a mask, right? So there's medical reasons why people don't wear a mask.
Yeah.
This is an opportunity for people to self-regulate as well, right? Like I think that I don't think every store where they say, well, in public spaces you have to have a mask on, you're not actually kicked out of the store if you don't wear a mask. They're assuming that there's a medical reason why you're not wearing that mask, and they're not chasing you around the store to do that. It's not about collecting fees, and I don't think it's about a bylaw officer collecting fees. It's just about elevating the level of safety and potentially making people realize that if we follow suit like what's happening all over Canada, we're going to see some increased numbers, and maybe there's an opportunity to help prevent the spread, and for us as community leaders to put in place a little bylaw that may make people think twice about it.
See, I have to disagree with you when you say that High Prairie's not taking it seriously, because I know of a business that
Just not
had a
ads.
sign on their door, and the door was locked, no more than 6 customers in the store. You waited outside till a customer left. Same thing at the bank. To go to insurance, you need to make an appointment. We are following those regulations and doing the best we can.
But we're probably not doing this for the business community as much as we're saying public spaces, because we're not like we're entering hockey season. We're going to have in and out of the arena, in and out of the pools open again. It's more about even the public
Okay,
spaces.
well, so
right?
then why don't you make this into just a town-owned facility then, that you're going to, that masks are mandatory? Why are you doing it across the board? Make it into just a town-owned facility.
The boss.
Oh, yeah.
No, we have to have the deputy mayor.
That's right, yeah. So, this is a very divisive, for some people, very divisive concept, right? You're imposing on my rights, but there's also, I've had some people say, I don't want to wear a mask, you can't do it, and other people saying, I want more masks. I think we should all be wearing it already in public spaces, right? Because I'm worried about my health, I'm worried about other people's health. It's a tough one because it's the rights of one, right? And then your right to be germ-free, and then the right of others not to do what they want, right? So, when you look at it from that point of view, it's a bit of a philosophical statement. But what I'm hearing around most of the council is that, yes, we should be implementing masks when it gets to a point. Some are happy with 10. I would like to see it a little bit higher or upon council decrees, but
I like that.
when I look back on our records, because I was keeping records for a long time when it first was implemented, we did get up to, I think, 19 at one time, back in April. So I'm thinking, if we get above 15, that's when we should be really taking account. But even those, if I remember right, those 19s were some of the JB Woods was 8 or 9 of them, right? And so for me, a little bit higher of a number, and maybe we don't even put one in at this point, but I think we need a bylaw, we need to be ready. And I really applaud Rod for getting this together and saying, okay, once we hit, this was what we wanted, was this discussion. Where are we at as a council? And I think Rod's hearing that there is a, not total agreement, for sure, but I think there's agreement around the table that we need to be prepared. And if we get to a number where it's getting bad, we need to implement it. And whether that number, I could live with 10. I'm not going to, vote against it for that. I think we need it. But I just think 10's a little bit low. That's my thinking. But other than that, at 15, I'd be really happy.
Well, we can evaluate when it comes to that.
That's right, or we could just leave it open and say we're ready and we'll reevaluate. If it's getting up to 10, we're going to look at implementing this, right?
Close your wallet.
Somebody open their purse.
I thought Arlen opened his wallet.
Okay, so we've been around this quite a bit. I'm just going to ask Rod, do you need anything more from us at this point?
Well, maybe a little bit better direction. I'm definitely hearing from the discussion here that the majority are thinking something needs to be done. I also heard earlier that maybe some of the details may need to be worked on.
Like an
And-
expiry date or?
expiry date or
whatever.
even, there was,
Yeah.
and so, so maybe an expiry date is good, because you can rescind before the expiry date, but if there was some other additional details, I just wonder if it's, how we proceed on that. I mean, we could come back to the, October 28th meeting and do a couple fine tunings, because we just put this together. I think there's a couple just minor tweaks from more of a legal perspective we need to change, and then maybe take direction on some of the other changes, so that at least you have it there. You could even, you could even pass it a couple times, so that have it ready to roll, and not give it third reading until you hit the magic number, and then you can change that number. If right now it's 10 and you decide 15 or whatever it is, you can change it, amend it, and
Or take the number out.
and maybe we just
Or put, so that,
Description of our medical merit.
or you can put it that, NHS procedures or recommendations supersede ours, if theirs are higher than ours, then we go with NHS. I mean, there's all sorts of options you can put in there to finalize things, but the final decision would come to whether this council would implement it or not.
Obviously, theirs overrule ours, right? But I think, Rod, just for direction, I would think, from what you've heard, make a couple of tweaks and bring back first reading at our next council meeting.
administration could do that, or there's also the bylaw committee.
committee first.
Yeah, I'm not sure when that is meeting.
I don't know.
Very important.
Donna, do you have a meeting, bylaw committee meeting?
What's that?
Do you have a bylaw committee meeting coming up?
No,
It's whatever.
no.
Mary arranges those, so.
But,
You got them off?
yeah, you got them.
So
Good
maybe your
job.
next meeting date, that should
We
be
never, no, because.
It
we
depends
have
on when they need a
what we-
bylaw review, I guess.
Oh,
You need to join that committee.
new. Wow.
So, but when I look at it from bylaw committee, there's not gonna be a lot. I mean, this is one that we gotta move on. If we don't have a meeting right away, this is taken from another community, so it's pretty well defined. We can, as council, can hash out some of the fine details at a meeting and go from there. We're in agreement to go ahead and bring it back.
Well, we could give it a first reading right now.
Go ahead with the recorded vote.
No, let's go to bylaw and let them make some tweaks to it.
Or just have it administration.
Schedule, we don't know when we'll meet again.
Yeah.
You're probably gonna have the organizational meeting before you have a bylaw.
Yeah.
Check with Mary, and she's the one in charge.
So let's just have
Well, let's
administration,
just
because of
bring
the
it back to
timeliness of it,
council.
let's just have administration bring back with a few tweaks that we discussed, which I think Arlen made a good point about the point, or the amount of cases. We can't have the bylaw changing on a regular.
Okay.
So once it's
So I
implemented.
think administration will bring back the October 28th. We will do some of the, maybe just potential tweaks just from an administrative perspective. I know there was two key pieces, and that was one on, do we want to contract or expand some of the exemptions? I heard one comment on that, and the other comment I heard, well, obviously it's 10, 15, or 20. I mean, I think, or just leave the number out and we just approve, council approves it and we move forward. Maybe I could leave it just the way it is, and council can always amend it before third reading and just go with that. So if there's anything else, I don't know where, maybe we'll leave the one comment with regards to exemptions, et cetera, as far as the discussion topic at October 28th, unless there is direction now that you'd like to give administration. Otherwise, I think we'll just take the administrative type issues.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. Sure, that's good. Okay, we had a motion before to have a discussion was the motion. And all of those in favor? We had the discussion, opposed? Oh.
You don't want the discussion?
Yeah.
What was the discussion?
We've had a discussion.
That's right, we can't, yeah.
Should have voted before we started the
That's
discussion.
true, you just can't please everybody.
That's right, and not in this topic for sure.
Oh, you don't do a survey on every meeting.
on to our next topic, written and verbal reports, starting with Councillor Danaka.
Good night, Richard.
Have a verbal report from the library.
Yeah, I always write down when a discussion.
So is that good or bad, Richard?
Good.
Is it good or bad?
Good.
Okay,
Good views.
all right.
I like to ask some things about it.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. I would expect nothing less, actually.
Pardon me?
I would expect nothing less.
So, as you're all aware, we picked a new library representative because Rhonda had resigned, and because of that, they had to switch some of the signing authorities for the library. Their after school and other programs with COVID, basically in regards to the after school programs and the Christmas party, as well as the Christmas store, I mean, it seems far away, but anyway, those programs have been suspended till the end of the year. They'll relook at them again. We have a budget meeting coming up to get that process. Tracy ordered some new shelving. It arrived because the other shelving was old. The wheels were broken. It was really hard to move. The shelf parts were all bowed from the books. So she got some really nice shelving. It looks actually quite sharp. Again, some staff changes. Rachel, the program coordinator, she unfortunately had to resign her position for personal reasons. But she will finish off the online crafts that she's been doing. They eventually went through some of the resumes that were put forth for that position, and Margie Highland was hired as a program coordinator. I'm not sure how that's going to play out now based on what just happened with her husband. As well, the one gal that was filling in on maternity, that gal will be coming back in the next month or so. So that person that was filling in, she is going to transition into the program, not the liaison position. The liaison position, she will transition from that into that, because she has a lot of connections with the First Nation communities around the area, so we think it'll be a good fit. And I'm not sure why, but anyway, the Alberta Lung Association distributed through Peace Library Systems a radon testing kit. So the radon testing kit is available at the library that you would just sign out and test your house for your levels of radon. And it's just in the winter months that radon levels seem to be high. So it came into circulation on October the 1st, so it's available for anybody who wants to test. They go in, sign, bring it back, is my understanding. I move my verbal report for information.
All right. Any questions or comments for Councillor Danaka? Seeing none, all in favor? Councillor Gilroy?
As our last meeting was September 22nd, that was in the middle of AUMA. So as I promised, I sent the link to each of the councillors of all of the things that happened. I'm still receiving the occasional link, like to the Premier's address and others. If you would like those, let me know. I can pass those on. But it was, once again, I was very disappointed in the numbers of, because I did check the voting on the during the resolutions, and they went as high as 300 and as low as 260 or 264, and that was for the library stuff. But I was impressed with the voting for things such as widening the scope for nurse practitioners, so that they would be able to directly bill the government as opposed to being part of the hospital operating budget, which is where they are now. It's a recommendation, of course, to the government, and it was passed by 98%. So that's pretty good. Grand Prairie was, they decided that they wanted to double the price you're going to pay for your cell phones 911. They figure going from 44 cents to $1 is not a problem for everyone. So they want to do it for every device a person has for every month. But they would not actually address the issue of what happens about dead zones. In fact, they made a joke out of it, so I was not happy with that. But there were a lot of ones. Well, the joke simply was, Councillor Courtney, that, gee, I like to go to dead zones so I don't have to answer my phone. And I thought that was a bit unrealistic, since considering we brought up a new thing on emergency vehicles, tow truck drivers that keep getting hit and things like that. I thought it was very inconsiderate, personally. And so there was a number of ones that I can give you more of a lay down on that. It was really good. And the only other real meeting I went to after that was the AGM for the watershed, and that was held in town at the Elks, and it went quite well. Just the side note that I probably shouldn't be saying, but I'll say it anyway. When it comes to budgeting, remember last year we gave them a break on fees for their payroll, and I think we need to look into that and decide as a council whether or not we want to do it again this year. I don't necessarily believe we need to or should. I think as a way of saving money, I think we should actually take that discount away personally. But I get in trouble for that because I'm representing us on the watershed. So anyway, and the councillor that passed away in Lesser Slave River, Brian Roche, and another gentleman that passed away, they just started a scholarship that they're going to be offering in the next couple of years, that will actually be for a science student or someone to work for or wants to do some work in the environment. It's going to be a return bursary thing where they can come back and do work up here. So that's another scholarship that will be available to our students, which is awesome. So other than that, I move my verbal report for information.
Any questions? Councillor Gilroy?
I didn't get the joke.
Yeah. All in favor? All right, over to me. I also attended the AUMA. The online format was interesting. I mean, it was fine, but you certainly missed the interaction with other counselors and being able to talk with them and stuff. But I mean, for getting through the resolutions, I thought it was good. You could get through them and vote. It all went pretty smoothly on that part. I attended a webinar on priority-based budgets with our CFO, and it was interesting. I actually should have asked her if she was going to contact him and ask the presenter, because part of our fee for the webinar included a one-on-one session. And we came up with some questions. There was lots of, the general gist is, it makes a lot of sense to tie your budget into what's a priority, but it does take time to identify what your priorities are. And, you can go into a lot of detail on what each of the services costs, or you can, do it on a more general level. So, because that was one of the questions that was asked, how much detail do you need? And they said, well, it's up to you. How much detail do you want? So, it's something we can look at, and it won't be for this year, but we're already in a lot of ways doing that. What's the priority? Especially as we're heading into the tougher times, we got to identify what services are important and then budget according to those. So it's, I also, I was supposed to be in, there was a webinar today on, for brownfields. It was a free one, but couldn't get on. There was some glitches with the software that was supposed to get us logged on. So that didn't happen. Last thing, we still need to meet to get some ideas. We still haven't given our CAO any feedback yet, so we need to, maybe if we can get through tonight in time, we can do it tonight. But if we can't do it tonight, maybe what we can do is an email. If you have anything, send them to me and we can go from there. So, and I'll send that out if we can't get it tonight, but we need to get some feedback going there. I move my report for information. Any questions? All in favor? It's carried. Councillor Courtley?
Just went to one meeting. I missed the other rec master plan meeting. I was detained or tied up, however you want to call it, so I missed that meeting, but Brian went in my place. But I attended the joint recreation meeting on Friday. It was actually a really good meeting. Went over a lot of the budget, a lot of different things going on, or the proposed expenses, I guess you want to call it. Not really the full budget yet, but it was definitely an eye-opener to what is coming in the future. So with that is a lot of major obvious decisions we're going to have to be faced with soon, once we have more information in front of us. I don't know how much I can really say because it's what it is, but we're looking at all factions of our recreation. Besides the master plan, this is where we're at right now. Is we're looking at all services, all expenses, all incomes. We're going to look at all kinds of ideas as to how we're going to move forward. For obvious reasons, the county has no money now, they say, and we will not have any money either. So we're looking at all kinds of ideas for right from different programming to maybe dropping some time services, different things, services to the public. There's all kinds of ideas out there, so we should know more by the next meeting, I think, possibly. But we got a lot of hard decisions to make ahead of us, not just as a joint recreation, but as our council is going to be faced with some big decisions as well soon. So not going to be comfortable, but it's what it is.
It is what it is.
It is what it is, right? So, but there was some positives out of that. The arena use is looks like it's going to be maintained and up for volume of ice rental. It looks good. Looks positive as far as that projection forward from here through the rest of the season. Looks like it's going to be status quo, if not maybe a little bit more, because there's more rec teams requesting ice time besides the Red Wings and besides minor hockey And the only thing is, figure skating won't be requesting any ice time until after the new year, into January, correct? Yeah. So then that'll kick into place as well. So Rick has done a great job in his report. I think he's done a good job with Rick and Rod with the handling of ice time and patrons during COVID, and allowing a certain amount of people in and out, and how they're handling, and they've got it all laid out, and I was impressed. He's got it looked after. I think it'll be okay as far as the facility and how they handle the people. So yeah, that's really all I have, unless I forgot something, Deb. Is there anything else of that meeting?
Chime in just a little tiny bit on that. We're from that meeting, we discussed the joint use meeting with the school division, and all we did was have an opportunity to have a conversation to prepare ourselves to maybe present that we're facing some challenges in the future, and we may have to take a look at a different type of an agreement maybe moving forward, where the schools will have to make some decisions as well as to how we handle that. So that meeting's coming up. There is actually less time to book at the arena. Ricky's done a pretty good job of coordinating the schedule, but because of COVID, we're using twice as many dressing rooms per team, right? Because they can have to split into 2 dressing rooms per
11 or 12 per room, I think, dressing room. I think it is.
Yeah, and then the
11.
And then the opportunity to clean in between. So there's some dead ice, but we termed it COVID ice, so we don't have to call it dead ice. And then we discussed how, and that was based on Judy's kind of comment about the parking outside of JC Park, how we'll try to have the gates opened so we can, and this is in an attempt to allow people to access the park with this whole COVID thing. Maybe not everybody's even using the facilities that are there, the public facilities, but maybe the park is a facility that we should make sure that they can walk the trails and have some more access to outside spaces. So we're going to do that. And we just discussed how AHS rental is going to help our budget out a little bit, but definitely not to the degree that we need it. But we are very grateful for your quick work, Rod, on getting that rental for recreation. That's about it for recreation.
Okay, so we have a motion.
Yeah, well, you know what? I'm so good. I have a seconder.
And it's hard though when you go to the same
I have an
meeting,
assistant.
right? Like you just fill in the blanks, eh?
I can only talk so long, so I have to get my assistant to talk.
You did good. You got normal.
Can I move my verbal report for information?
Any questions for Councillor Courtley? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay, Councillor Rose.
That was kind of my report. No?
Yeah.
The only other one I'll throw in there is that community business community meeting that we had with the Community Foundation, I guess, and Alberta Works, and Rod was there, and he kind of reported a little bit. Well, I guess you were more on the tourism thing that you talked about. You talked about that at the meeting too, which was I was trying to get a handle on what that actually was. I think this group's actually going to be good. I think it's worthwhile to sort of be part of. What I really liked about it is, and I think we need to really think about this, is that Zoom is really popular. People actually like it, and I've been part of the chamber for a number of years, and we tried really hard to get the business community bought in, and we know that there's a number of reasons why they have challenges. One of them is accessing the time to go to meetings, and with Zoom we had 5 or 6 business people from the community. One was in their car, and they were just at their businesses, and they clicked the link, and they were there, and they were at the meeting. So they didn't have to go to a formal spot, and they didn't have to leave their business if they had to. So I mean, it's something that we should continue to think about doing in other formats, but I think, or for other groups. But I can see where this is actually going to be a good format for the business community, because they did struggle to sometimes leave their spaces, right? And I thought they were quite engaged in the meeting. like, there was lots of questions that were asked, and that's how Josh and Deanna handled the meeting. They threw out, basically what were the needs, what were the challenges. So you got a lot of input from people in the community. Then there's people from Big Lakes County, and myself and Rod, who was with Big Lakes County, because they like to congregate at their chamber and watch Zoom meetings. But anyway, that was good. And there was actually quite a few councillors from Big Lakes County that were part of it, and some administration there. So some of the things that I'll just give you a little synopsis over what were the concerns that the business community faced. They brought up basically closing businesses, the lack of a large chain store. There was a couple of members that saw that they would like to see that we had Canadian Tire, or like that we did some work in lobbying, that type of thing. They would like to see this group do that. I don't know that that was really the intention of the organizers, and the organizers are trying to say, how do we as a small group of people do a few things that maybe add some value to your business, or what can we offer, because they have access to things like webinars and anyway, little sort of support services that they can bring to business community, of which they did. They offered them a number of links and stuff, which I think were quite enjoyed by the group. We talked about broadband being an issue, because ultimately retail businesses are struggling in the community because they can't go that next step, which it would be to offer their services to people out of the area on a website base that they can actually count on, I guess. Solutions were, one of the things was events. We talked about how realistically when the town's busy, the rodeo and powwows and even hockey tournaments, how when we as a municipality, what we can do, which would be support the events, because when the town is busy with things happening, parade for Moonlight Madness, or that it does make a difference. People come in from other communities, and then our town is filled during those times, so the retail businesses do well during those things. So it was something for us to kind of keep in mind as we support something like the rodeo. That's kind of what we're doing, is supporting our local businesses. And then they just made a next meeting date, and got feedback from the group that said that they would pass it along to others, and that they saw value in trying to grow this format. So I move my report for information, unless anybody has any questions.
Seeing no questions, all in favor? And Councillor Stenhouse.
So I'm just going to tell you what I've been up to. On September 29th, I did the FCSS 101 webinar in Joussard. That's the same one that Rod was at. On the 24th, we had a bylaw meeting. And that's it. That's all I've been up to. So I moved my verbal report for information.
Oh, I have one more thing, but I'll just give it to you guys. This is that.
No, you do it.
This is a report on that master plan.
All right, just while we have a motion to receive a report, any questions for her, Councillor Stenhouse? Seeing none, all in favor? Okay. Carried. We'll take a short break, and then we need to do our confidential item, go into a